Images of women spinning or sewing in their homes were loved by artists for more than 2,000 years. Such pictures soothed and comforted viewers. And this was especially true in the 18th century, when a painting of a woman happily sewing or embroidering conveyed the perfect domesticated woman. But Anna Blunden, a Victorian painter, sabotaged this traditional image of domestic bliss. Blunden was born in London in 1829 and grew up in Exeter, in southwest England. A prolific artist, she tackled portraits and landscapes, but she was also concerned with the plight of ordinary working people and published pamphlets on social topics. Her best-known work, painted in 1854, was called For Only One Short Hour. It was inspired by the Song of the Shirt, a poem written by Thomas Hood in 1843. Hood's poem focuses on the appalling conditions of women who sewed in their homes for a living. They labored day and night but did not make enough to get by. Their pay was based on piecework, that is, they got paid for each item they made, not for the hours it took to make it. Blunden's title comes from a section of the poem where the seamstress dreams of taking a rest. In hoping to inspire her viewers to social activism on behalf of these women, Blunden is tapping into a new 19th century art movement called social realism. Social realist artists depicted ordinary contemporary life. They drew attention to the terrible living and working conditions of poor people. Social realist artists hope to inspire people who are well off to help those less fortunate than themselves. Blunden places a poor seamstress in the foreground, so we can't miss her. But if viewers are to help her, they must sympathize with her. Trouble is, well-bred middle and upper-class people saw the poor as unwashed and unruly. And in art, the poor had always been portrayed as figures of fun and ridicule. Blunden and her like-minded contemporaries are out to change such negative images. She does this in two ways. First, she chooses her setting and the objects in it carefully. Specifically, Blunden makes sure the viewer encounters some feel-good objects immediately on entering the painting. In the foreground on the table, for instance, there's a white shirt, a symbol of cleanliness. To the Victorians, cleanliness is next to godliness. Farther back to the left, a wooden sewing box lies open on the table. This reminds the viewer of the traditional comforting images of women sewing at home. Now the viewer, comforted, can enter. Blunden leaves a place in the foreground at the table for the viewer, and she drapes the shirt over the edge of the table in such a way that she invites the viewer to pick up the shirt and the spool of thread, thimble, and button card lying nearby and get to work. In addition to choosing the items with care, Blunden makes sure her heroine looks morally pure. The viewer must be sure of the seamstress's moral purity. Lower-class women were deemed by those higher up to be morally bankrupt. So Blunden dresses her heroine modestly in a plain, old-fashioned, long-sleeved dress. Her hair is primly gathered into a bun, and she does not gaze out at the viewer, as a sultry temptress might do in a Victorian painting such as this one by James Tissot. Instead, the seamstress pauses in her work and looks up to heaven, her hands clasped in a gesture of prayer. Not only is she modest, she is also pious, and piety is a desirable feminine virtue in Victorian society. Now the viewer's heart is being broken. The austerity of the surroundings contributes to this. The small attic room has a view, but of what? Framed by the open window, we see more mean houses like the one our heroine inhabits. There are many more women like her. On the left, we see lots of chimneys. Smog fills the air. Blunden was not the only artist to turn an image of domestic bliss into an unhappy one. English painter Richard Redgrave tackled the subject a few years earlier in 1844 and 1846. Redgrave places his seamstress in a room lit by candlelight, and a night sky can be seen through the small window on the left, reminders that work continues through the night. Because Redgrave's seamstress is a full-length figure, she is farther away from us. Blunden's figure is closer to us and more difficult to ignore. Charles Rossiter, a British painter, opts for a full-length figure in his Song of the Shirt, painted in 1854, the same year as Blunden's work. Rossiter's seamstress looks more physically comfortable, less exhausted. The sloping wooden wall behind her suggests a room in an attic, but she at least has bread and tea to sustain her. A potted geranium and some flowers in a vase might also lift her spirits. Moreover, she seems to be thinking about the letter in her lap, which lies on a shirt and partly covers it. By comparison, both Redgrave and Blunden depict the seamstress more closely involved with the sewing of the shirt. Impressionist painter Claude Monet, 11 years younger than Blunden, painted his wife Camille embroidering in 1875. Monet offers a more traditional and comforting example of femininity. His wife sits at a distance, so we are not forced to relate to her emotionally, and she is dressed in gorgeous clothes and surrounded by tasteful things, so we assume she's not sewing for a living. Blunden moved to Birmingham after she married and died there in 1915.